at what she did with Syria. You look in so many different ways. She will not be a good president. She doesn't have the strength. She doesn't have the stamina. I know about dealing with China. I've made billions of dollars dealing with China. China can be dealt with, and you can get along with them. But Hillary does not have the strength or the stamina to deal with China or other things.
Well, let's go to Jake and Danny. It's interesting, Jake. He spent a lot of time talking about Hillary Clinton tonight, and she spent a lot of time talking about Donald Trump tonight.
That's right. They're both, I think, eager to pivot, eager to go and talk about each other and to get the primary and caucus process behind them, Dana.
Oh, I mean, I think that seems abundantly clear, and even more so, I think, most for Donald Trump, who has the furthest to go when it comes to actually getting the nominee and being the presumptive nominee, as he said tonight that he is.
Let's bring in David Chalian. David, our political director, one of the things that's very interesting is Bernie Sanders earlier tonight making the argument that he wins independent voters, and that's why he doesn't do as well in these closed primary states when only registered Democrats can vote. He does better when independents or unaffiliated voters are allowed to pick. And he's making that argument to the, or he was earlier tonight, he makes that argument to the delegates, to the superdelegates, hoping that they understand that he would be a general election candidate that would be stronger than Hillary Clinton. He also cites head-to-head matchup polls. But you have some exit poll information about how strong a general election candidate he might be.
Well, he's not wrong, Jake, to cite those polls. He is right that he does better against the Republican candidates in those general election matchups than does Hillary Clinton. But here's where I think he is making this last stand argument about electability. And I think from tonight's data you're going to see here, it's falling on deaf ears. So first of all, let me just say, electability, very low priority for Democratic voters. In Pennsylvania, take a look at this. Only 11% of the Democratic electorate said that winning in November was their top candidate quality, the lowest candidate quality of all those offered. And among those, Clinton wins overwhelmingly. So for the small slice of 11% of voters who believe in winning in November is the most important quality, she still wins those voters. Now, then we also asked who has the best chance of beating Trump. And here, take Connecticut tonight, for example. Hillary Clinton, 64% of the primary voters said she has the better chance of defeating Trump in November. 33% said that of Sanders. In Maryland, who has the best chance to defeat Trump? Clinton gets 73% in that question. Sanders gets 23%. Now, Jake, as you just said, he would say, yeah, only registered Democrats. These are closed primaries. That's who's answering this question. My independent voters aren't in there to answer it. But the point is, he's trying to make this argument to DNC superdelegates. These are the very people who sort of make up the body electorate in closed primaries. And they're not interested. It's not an important issue. And for those that it is an issue, they really believe she is the more electable candidate. So it's interesting to see how Sanders has put aside what could be a strength, sort of hit Clinton on her honest and trustworthiness, which is a weakness in the poll numbers, and more Democrats actually care about that as a candidate quality. But he doesn't use that part of his arsenal. He's making this argument as one of his last stands, and I think it's falling on deaf ears.
Interesting. David Chalian, thanks. And Dana, whatever you think of Bernie Sanders, whatever you think of Hillary Clinton is going to have some work to do if she gets the nomination to get those independent voters, the ones who like Bernie Sanders so much. They have deep, deep doubt about her.
Right, and that is one of the reasons why Bernie Sanders really took off the way he did and continues to have such passionate supporters because they like his message, they like the messenger, frankly, and for a lot of reasons. I thought it was interesting that she didn't do it tonight, but over the past week, Hillary Clinton talked about the fact that when she ran in 2008, she just turned and supported Barack Obama, and she got her supporters behind him, and that's the way it should be, you know, without trying to sort of extract things like it seems Bernie Sanders is doing in his statement tonight. That might be true on the substance, but correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't she also ask Obama to help retire her campaign debt? I mean, there were some quid pro quos going on.
I'm not sure if that was for the endorsement or for her to come on board to be Secretary of State. But at some point, Obama had to agree to that. David Axelrod or somebody might be able to shed more light on that. But there are always concessions. And Jesse Jackson in 1984 demanded that the primary process become more proportional in terms of allocation. That was one of the concessions he got. Other candidates in the past have wanted to be considered to be vice president.
And by the way, the people who don't win but do very well, they earned it. I mean, I think that's fair to say that they earned the right to kind of use the leverage that they have because they have a lot of supporters who were following their causes, following their campaigns, and want them to continue to push it, even if they're not actually going to be the nominee.
Sure, and look, he's not asking for anything for himself personally. He's talking about issues that he cares about. He's not saying, I demand to be considered for vice president, or at least not in this statement. He's saying minimum wage, Medicare for all, cleaning up money out of politics. These are the issues that he campaigned on in many ways. So, Anderson, to you.
If only we had David Axelrod and so what happened in 2000?
Well, look, there were obvious discussions back and forth about what the Clinton campaign needed and so on. It was a different set of circumstances, though, because there was a strong consensus among the party leadership on Obama's behalf. There wasn't really a question as to whether she was going to come along, but there were questions, for example, the Clinton campaign. It was important to her to have her name entered into nomination and to have a roll call. We were not that enthused about that because it would underscore the fact that the party was fairly evenly divided. So the roll call went forward, and then she stopped it and came on the floor of the convention, very dramatically moved for the nomination of Barack Obama by acclamation. It was a very important moment. But it is not easy. There are always negotiations involved. Campaigns need things as they unwind. Their dignity needs to be afforded to the candidate who lost, which is why the roll call went forward. And in Bernie Sanders' case, he really did run in this campaign to advance a set of issues. And I think the way, as I said earlier this evening, the way you build a bridge is to incorporate those issues in a significant way into your platform.
Let's play some of what Secretary Clinton said tonight in her speech, kind of reaching out and building that bridge, or attempting to build that bridge to Sanders, his supporters.
I applaud Senator
so well with independents, and that is, should the Democratic Party open its primaries up to allow independents to vote and not have just closed primaries? I believe if you want the independents to love you in November, you got to show a little love in April and open up the process. But I know most of my Democratic friends disagree with that. They think the party should be an elitist, snobby party that is just members.
I'm sure they
only.
argue it just that way.
Yes, exactly. They do.
It's not a uniform rule, Bill. I mean, right? I mean, it varies by state, obviously.
Right. It's true.
And you have,
but
look, I mean,
there could be a national point.
What Bernie Sanders did was, I mean, he was extraordinary. I mean, he started off, as we've talked about, as that kind of classic wine track candidate. And he's expanded well beyond that. He did win young voters in 23 of the 25 states with exit polls. He won independents in 22 of them. He's also won blue-collar whites now in 15 states, according to the exit polls, including, at least by the provisional right now, all 3 tonight. Now, that does give him some hope for recovery in Indiana, West Virginia, and Kentucky, because all of those were states where in 08 non-college whites were at least half of the total vote on the Democratic side. But there are 2 big hills he just simply cannot get over. African Americans are one of them, and the other one is Democrats. I mean, she's won Democrats in 22 of the 24 states, and was at what? She was at 59% in Connecticut tonight, 61% in Pennsylvania, 69% in Maryland. I mean, it's hard to win a party's nomination if you can't win the party's nomination.
That's why you have to open up the primaries.
And many Democrats would say, okay, and I hear your point about opening up the primaries, which wouldn't go far, but many Democrats would push back to Bernie Sanders and his supporters, and we'll probably see this in negotiations as we go forward, get rid of caucuses. I mean, I think that a lot of people want to get rid of caucuses, so you can. And I may never be able to.
You guys should write up. You guys should write all that up and submit it.
All right, but fewer superdelegates.
Let me just
finish the thought, and then we got to go.
Independent voters. We were talking about independent voters really quickly, and Barack Obama lost independent voters by 8 points and he only 5 points, excuse me, and he only won independent voters in one swing state. That was North Carolina. So I do think this whole independent voters and Hillary Clinton's problems are a bit blown.
It is true that her numbers among independents
More to come.
are quite bad right now.
Donald Trump
much worse than Obama's were in 2008.
Donald Trump says all his votes should make him the presumptive nominee. That's what he said in his speech tonight. How did Trump do in the delegate race tonight? The latest numbers after this.
In Iowa, for example, Ted Cruz won 8 and Donald Trump won 7, and that's how it'll go in the first ballot. I'm told that when they are all told through the process, Cruz will probably have close to 25, and Trump will go down. Yeah. So, you know, he's not playing that game well. But let me just make one point. I'm sorry, Ron.
Playing it better.
But in this mashup that you did before we started speaking of what people said tonight, it is a little bit laughable to hear Cruz talk about the candidates, you know, we're running against the candidate of the lobbyists and of Washington. He is relying on the lobbyists in Washington at this point to deliver the nomination that the voters are not delivering.
Right, he keeps talking about the will of the people. Right. I mean, the will of the people is who they're voting for.
Ahead in votes. I mean, part of the clarity of tonight was not only Trump's strengths, but really underscoring the limitations of Ted Cruz and John Kasich as alternatives, which are going to have implications if Trump falls short of that 1237. I mean, after tonight, Ted Cruz simply has failed at the fundamental promise of his campaign. The fundamental initial promise was he was not going to be Mike Huckabee. He was not going to be Rick Santorum. He was going to bring together not only religious conservatives, but economic conservatives. He's won voters who are not evangelicals at this point in one state, Wisconsin. Tonight, his performance among voters who are not evangelicals, 12% in Maryland, 10% in Connecticut, 16% in Pennsylvania, 12% last week in New York. And then for John Kasich, these were the kind of places where a candidate like that should do their best. The suburbs of Philadelphia, Connecticut, moderate, white-collar. Didn't do it here. It's going to be hard for them, I think, to go to the convention, even if Trump is short, and say, I can be stronger.
What's the I do think it bears worth repeating. These are states where a moderate liberal Republican will do well. Donald Trump did well. This was going to happen. That said, you know, Cruz does have to regain the ground in Indiana. He certainly has to get the evangelical vote. He has to prove this is the last test.
He has to win Indiana.
I think so. I mean, to change the momentum, to go into the convention, the Western states, that necessitates an Indiana win.
But to Ron's point, I think it's underscored when you look at the map and when you see the entire eastern half of the United States entirely dominated by Trump. Cruz didn't just lose in the Northeast, he lost the Southeast.
But these aren't states that are going to be in play for Republicans necessarily in a general election against Hillary Clinton.
I think we can make some of them in play. Pennsylvania,
the other thing is you saw Trump tonight winning groups where he has not performed well. I mean, he put up his best numbers anywhere among college-educated Republicans, his best numbers among women, both of which have been, you know, holding out as Trump has moved forward. I mean, it does feel this was a different kind of pattern for Trump than we have seen to this point.
Republicans must win Indiana, and a Republican must be able to win Indiana. If Trump can't win Indiana, it doesn't matter if he can win those mid-Atlantic northeastern states.
But I'm not sure how the primary turn. Look, I agree with you. I think if you look at the polling right now, there's very little chance that Trump's going to win the states that he won tonight. So this was a triumphant night for him, but they're not Republican states. As Ron, I think, pointed out, the Republican hasn't won Pennsylvania since '88, and the polls suggest that he's not likely to win it now. So these aren't necessarily predictive. And if he were to lose Indiana, I'm not sure that's predictive either.
But the reason I think that tonight was big for Trump is, and just to give him some kudos, because I mean he deserved it the last 2 weeks, if nothing else, is he dispelled narratives. Donald Trump was made out to be a regional, low-information voter's candidate, and he's not that by any stretch. I mean, Donald Trump won in the Deep South. Donald Trump won in New York. I mean, Donald Trump has won in the North.
For months, people were saying Donald Trump had a cap at 35%.
And then Donald Trump today, in one night, he showed you that he can win. He can win the wealthy in Connecticut, and then he can go and win the blue collar in rural Pennsylvania. So, I mean, I do think that Donald Trump tonight, with his victories, dispelled these narratives that just have to be tossed out the window.
Anderson, which is why I want to take the other side of an argument I myself made a little earlier in this panel, which is Democrats would be making a big mistake to underestimate Donald Trump's appeal in the general election. We may laugh at him and make fun of him, but look, he's shown amazing strength in this primary. It is an anti-establishment, as David stressed last hour or so, year, right? There's an appeal to that. On the trade issue, he can go into those Rust Belt states, I think, and really do well, and in the South. And we should not make the same mistake that Republicans made early in the primary process, which is to write him off.
And
He's
look
gonna
at
be
where
a
he was
serious
after
threat.
April 5th,
What's
right? After Wisconsin, April 5th. Came back, changed the narrative, right? It was all about Cruz on the rise and for Ted Cruz to be able to change the narrative away from Trump, and he turned it around. And yes, the calendar assisted him, but the campaign also changed. We don't know if the candidates changed.
And he's done
that
that
repeatedly.
That's hanging around, and they unveiled. I mean, to me, it's the same old Donald Trump. I mean, the thing that was most detestable the last 2 weeks, Lion Ted, which we've heard before, but then also the false charges about bribery. I mean, let's not dismiss the fact that Donald Trump plays dirty. Hillary Clinton ought to call him Dirty Don.
No, and here's the thing.
There we go. Thank you for that. We've been trying to find something.
Exactly to Gloria's point, you know, here's one of the things that Donald Trump has done so well is he's proven resilient. And I think Bill Clinton, who has very keen political instincts from the get-go, said do not underestimate this guy. And he's proven, despite every time we've said this is the end of Donald Trump, oh, could this be the end? Every time he's come back and proven to be resilient in a very large fashion.
Well, Donald Trump certainly showed himself to be resilient. A huge win tonight, huge wins across the board for him tonight, but Trump cannot take his foot off the gas if he wants to clinch the Republican nomination on the first ballot in Cleveland. The question is, what is his campaign's plan moving forward? Well, it's to not leave anything a chance. Details ahead.
Have evenings like this where you get record-setting votes, where you get record-setting delegates. I use the analogy of the boxer. You know, when the boxer knocks out the other boxer, you don't have to wait around for a decision.
Five states. In Pennsylvania, more impressive win for her there, 55.6% to Bernie Sanders, 43.6%. She wins by, about 12 points in Pennsylvania. Let's continue to take a look at her wins. In Delaware, even more impressive, 59.8% to Bernie Sanders, 39%, 39.2, a 20-point spread for Hillary Clinton in the state of Delaware. So that's an important win for her as well. Take a look at Maryland right now. She got 63% in Maryland to Bernie Sanders, 33%. That's a 30-point spread for Hillary Clinton in Maryland. In Rhode Island, that's the state that Bernie Sanders won. Bernie Sanders won. He won by 12 points in Rhode Island, 55% to 43%. So you can see the impressive wins for Donald Trump, for Hillary Clinton, that one win for Bernie Sanders in Rhode Island. John, this is a race that still has some ways to go, but it's a big night. You can't ignore the fact that this is a big night for Donald Trump.
The scope of the Trump win tonight makes it much more plausible to get him to this magic number of 1237. Wolf, we have him around 956 right now, still allocating some delegates, but he's going to end the night somewhere around here. Remember, Phil Mattingly a little bit earlier, though, said, we know from CNN reporting Donald Trump, there are 54 non-pledged, uncommitted delegates in Pennsylvania, but we know that Donald Trump is going to get at least 29 of those, probably higher of those. If you factor that 29 into this total, and then we start looking forward, that means at this point, Donald Trump would need, of the 502 delegates at stake from tonight forward, as we head into May and June, Donald Trump needs half of them, 50%. He started tonight needing 58% of the remaining delegates. He ends the night needing 50% of the remaining delegates. That alone tells you how important tonight was, to cut it from 58 to 50% going forward. So now let's take a look. Is that doable? Well, the next contest is next Tuesday night in Indiana. A couple weeks ago, Ted Cruz was leading, but in the polls now, Donald Trump is ahead. If Donald Trump can win in Indiana, let's say he splits the delegates with Ted Cruz, but Donald Trump comes out on top. If he can do that, he moves up to 990 plus these 29. So he's over 1,000 at that point, right? The next contests after that are in Nebraska. I think by all accounts, people expect Ted Cruz to win out in Nebraska. So let's give that one to Senator Cruz, who's had a lot of success, if you notice, out in this part of the country out here. And West Virginia, most people think Donald Trump will win and win them all in West Virginia that night. So if the next three contests go that way, Trump gets 2, Indiana and West Virginia, Cruz gets Nebraska. Then Trump here, now he's above 1050 when you add in these 29. And so next Tuesday night is critical for Donald Trump to continue to build this momentum and start reducing that percentage. He started tonight at 58. He ends tonight at 50. As this goes forward, now I'm going to just skip ahead here. This is May, and then the rest of the May calendar goes out to the West Coast. We finish in Oregon and Washington State. If Trump can win those, it would essentially be game over. We'll see what happens out there. But I just want to remind people, This is at the very end in New Jersey on June 7th, but this is essentially delegates in the bank for Donald Trump. Unless something dramatic changes, we expect him to win this. So you just see what starts to happen when you work that in. So can Donald Trump win Washington State? There's a conservative base in Washington State. It could be a Cruz state. Could be a Trump state. We'll have to see. 44 delegates there. Oregon in the end of May. If Donald Trump ends the month by adding at least one of these West Coast states, then his math is below 4, and we go into the California in the end if something like that happens. But the main test for Donald Trump, Wolf, I want to take these ones away and not get ahead of ourselves here. The main test for Donald Trump is simply, take these off here, is to get, if he can get Indiana next week, that the conversation among Republicans tonight is the last resort for the Stop Trump movement is for Cruz to win Indiana and win it convincingly to stop Donald Trump's momentum. And then we go on to West Virginia and Nebraska. But again, the simple math tonight, when you start the night needing 58%, you end the night needing 50%. It's pretty simple.
And the polls do show that California, the biggest prize of all 50 states, he's doing well in California, Trump, right now.
And this gives him 70% of the delegates. That's a big win. The Cruz or Kasich people say, no, we can keep him below that. Well, they didn't prove that tonight. They said they were going to pick up a lot of delegates tonight, and they didn't. Perhaps the math will change for them by the time they get to California. But if Trump does something like this, even if he's just a little bit over 100 there, I mean, you can just see this. That has been 1195 plus these 29, and I took away those states out there. So if you're going to stop him that next Tuesday night, and then somehow, if they could figure out a way for West Virginia, but I just don't see that as a possibility.
Yeah, Trump certainly looks very, very strong right now. Anderson, over to you.
Yeah, let's talk with our panel about surprises tonight. Did anything stand out to you? Did anything surprise you?
Yeah, it did, because, I began the night thinking I'm looking for him to get a majority in states. I want to see, a majority in these 5 states, but instead of seeing majorities, we're seeing potentially 60% margins. He's consistently overperforming. He overperformed in New York. He overperformed this week. Will that translate into Indiana? I think so, because I think now the momentum is in his favor. He has a tailwind behind him, and he's unstoppable. It was astonishing the win tonight.
Amanda, what surprised you?
Well, I believe in tough love. I expected a better speech out of Indiana from Ted Cruz. That stunt he pulled with the basketball hoop and measuring it, the Hoosier scene, he told the joke, but there was no punchline. He never tied a bow on it to make it understandable. And I just thought it was an amazing coincidence that he had a guy with a measuring tape on a ladder by the... This is a long-standing frustration I've kind of had watching this primary process play out, because after every big contest, there's a national speaking opportunity. These are national contests. These speeches matter. And when you continue to speak to these audiences, just the people in the room, not looking at everyone in the audience and viewing it as a national opportunity to gain momentum and build a message, it's a lost opportunity. And I don't think they've learned that lesson yet.
Okay. I think tonight Hillary Clinton did extremely well, and Donald Trump is the presumptive nominee. And I think I want to look one level below that, because tonight Katie McGinty also won, and Toomey is up for re-election in Pennsylvania, and that's a seat the Democrats are excited about. Ron Johnson is probably not happy that Donald Trump is the presumptive nominee. And one name that people haven't talked about who's not happy today is John McCain in Arizona is not happy that Donald Trump is the presumptive nominee. Because the Democrats, we feel very good and confident about our chances to take on Donald Trump, but we also feel very good and very confident about taking back the Senate. So, if Hillary Clinton goes in and takes Arizona, then we might see the end of a great legacy that is John McCain as well.
Bill Press, what surprised you?
First of all, I'm stunned, again, that we're talking about Donald Trump as the presumptive nominee. But what really surprised me tonight was Bernie Sanders stepping up to the plate so quickly and recognizing reality. He didn't give the old Kasich line, I won 1 delegate tonight, man, I'm on my way to the nomination. He said, look, I recognize the reality, and we're going to proceed to talk about the issues and keep this thing going so everybody gets a chance to vote. I thought it was a real class act. Really fit the moment, was necessary, and he delivered. Gloria?
I'm kind of looking for the relevancy now of John Kasich in all of this, who has been making the electability argument, but won 5 delegates tonight in an area that he should have done very well. And this whole sort of Cruz-Kasich deal in Indiana seems to me to be almost meaningless at this point, because if Kasich couldn't get anything in the Northeast, what's he going to do in Indiana? How's he going to help Cruz? Cruz is basically on his own there anyway.
And Mark, we haven't heard from you.
Well, let me be smug right now because I think it was 7
I believe
days
it was.
ago at about this time when I said this was going to be the most important election.
And there were some people who scoffed.
And guess what? You all laughed at me. Scoffing is a good word, of course.
Now it's Indiana.
Stop